Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to partner with North Shore Computer for this session on IT best practices for dermatology practices. My name is Matt Henson. I'm the marketing manager here at Ezderm. I am thrilled to introduce our speakers today, Michael Castronova and Trish Bringen from North Shore Computer. Michael leads business development and partnerships at North Shore Computer. He's got a background in project management and operational strategy. Michael focuses on helping healthcare practices align their IT and compliance effort and how they actually work together. He collaborates closely with clinical teams and vendors to ensure technology supports both security and productivity. His practical hands-on experience and approach has helped practices reduce risk and thrive in today's complex digital environment. And we have Trish here with us as well. Trish serves as the Vice President of Operations at North Shore Computer and is co-founder of Spin Compliance Solutions. Trish brings over a decade of experience across healthcare service lines and leads teams dedicated to delivering comprehensive IT and HIPAA compliance support. She's widely recognized for developing healthcare-focused technology solutions that address real-world operational challenges, and her commitment to client success and exceptional service has helped make North Shore Computer a trusted name in IT healthcare. I want to welcome both of them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Michael, and he's going to get us started. Michael, take it away for us.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thanks for the introductions, and thanks again to everyone for being here today. This session is all about practical, real-world IT security, specifically tailored for the dermatology space. We're not going to get too deep into any technical jargon or overwhelm you with theory. The goal here is to walk you through the most common risks we see, the protections that matter, a few changes that can prevent the kind of IT issues that slow down providers, frustrate your staff, or create compliance headaches. I'll be guiding us through most of the content today, and you'll also hear from Trish, our VP of Operations here at North Shore Computer, who will jump in throughout the session with some real-world insights from practices we work with every day. So let's jump in. Here's a quick look at what we'll be covering today. We'll start by highlighting some of the specific IT and security challenges that are common in dermatology practices, especially ones that can disrupt workflows and create compliance risks if they're not addressed early on. We'll break down the top vulnerabilities we see in the field and walk through practical ways to reduce that risk, even if you don't have a full internal IT team at this time. We'll also share a few key questions to ask when evaluating an IT partner, and then we'll wrap it up with an offer we've put together specifically for Ezderm users. At the end, we will open up for a quick Q&A, but feel free to drop any questions in the chat at any point, and we'll get to those, or as many of those as we possibly can at the end.
All right, that brings it to me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name again is Trish Bringen. I am the VP of Operations here at North Shore Computer. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction and for allowing us to be here this afternoon. So I'm going to start with a little bit about who we are. So we are North Shore Computer. We were founded back in the early 80s by our president. And when he founded North Shore Computer, it was a brick and mortar type setting with a break fix model. From there, our company developed into the service space. And at that point, that's when they began working with healthcare practices and assisting offices with their IT needs. In 1996, when HIPAA was established, I know that's like a pain point for most practices, so I'm on board with that. I understand the real struggle that comes along with HIPAA, but that's where we're here to help. So in 1996 is when our company grew across multiple service lines with a real focus on IT compliance. And since the 2000s, we've been focused at, we've been focused on practices of all sizes where we are assisting dermatology practices, oncology practices, urogynecology. We've got family medicine. There's a lot of different service lines that we help with. And just so that you all know, we are a family-run business. We've had employees with us for as many as 26 years. Retaining our employees as well as our customers is a very big priority of ours. Something that is a real big misconception out there that I like to talk about is when we partner with different practices, or if we're in that talking stage, a lot of times I hear from practices, well, you guys are in New York, and so we can't use you because we need we need an IT company that's in the same town that we are. And like I said, huge misconception. Um, you don't need to have an IT company close by. Our IT company services clients throughout this country, and 99% of our support is done remotely. Clients call into us, we log into their offices via remote technology, and then we mitigate their issues quickly. If there is a need to send a technician on site for whatever reason, and it does happen, we can do that as well, and we handle all of that for you. So that's never an issue. We are in house, being a family business since conception. Customer service is our top priority. You work with the same technicians every time you call in, and they understand your office. You're not just a number to us here at North Shore Computer. We're hands on, we're fully in house, and we understand the realities of running a practice because that's who we work with directly every single day. Over the course of several years, we have partnered with different EMR companies and organizations throughout the years, and we have become preferred IT vendors or compliance vendors for their customers. So we are well known out in the industry. Okay, so that takes care of a little bit of our background of who we are and where we've come from. So I'm going to pass it back to Michael, and he will take it from there.
Great. Thanks, Trish. So let's start with the bigger picture. Why IT challenges tend to look a little different in the dermatology space. Dermatology practices rely heavily on image capture, EMR access, device mobility, and fast-paced patient flow. That means you're dealing with larger file sizes, more connected equipment, and more staff moving across room and devices throughout the day. You're also often using multiple systems at once. Could be your EHR, imaging software, different payment tools. And even if one part of that chain slows down, it throws off your entire rhythm. That can mean a longer check-in. That can mean delayed photo uploads, charting that lags behind, or simply staff wasting time troubleshooting instead of focusing on patient care. Even when practices invest in upgrades like a new server or a router, we sometimes find that there's still older equipment in place that creates hidden bottlenecks. You may have been fine years ago, but now it can throttle network speeds and drag down entire systems. So knowing what equipment is in place and how it's interacting with the rest of your environment is key to optimizing for speed and efficiency. When your systems aren't built with that kind of workflow in mind, it's going to create friction. And over time, those little inefficiencies will start to compound. We see it happen far too often. And it's not always about a major outage or a security breach. Sometimes it's just about shaving 30 seconds off a task that gets repeated 100 times throughout the day. And that's where we see a lot of the real pain points live. One of the most common pain points that we see across dermatology is how imaging workflows are handled, or honestly, how they're not handled. From a full body photography to pre and post procedure shots, dermatology is one of the most image dependent specialties in all of the healthcare space. And as your practice grows, so is your image library. On average, we see over 2 terabytes of imaging data accumulated in just the first 2 years of operation, which is a huge amount of information that's being stored, accessed, and shared. And oftentimes it's on aging, overloaded networks that were never originally built to handle that kind of demand. And it's not just storage space. When your image access is slow, it delays everything from check-ins, documentation, provider movement between rooms. Breaks your rhythm, and it continues to build up the friction throughout the day. What's more concerning is that 60% of small practices still do not have formal backup plans for imaging. So if that data lives on a single server, or let's say it's on a local drive and something goes wrong, it's gone. which is a massive liability both operationally for you and from a HIPAA standpoint. Why we love the modern cloud-based backup solutions, and we don't just recommend them anymore, they really are critical now. Not only do they protect you from data loss, but they'll also make access faster, more secure, and more consistent across devices.
So this is where I'm going to interject, kind of like Michael said at the beginning of the presentation. I like to bring real world situations to anybody that I'm talking to so that they can kind of feel that I understand where they're coming from. So we had, before I start, it all comes down to having a solid foundation focused around security. That is huge for practices because you are in the medical industry. We had a client that came to us in April, so just about 6 weeks ago. They were a medium-sized optometry practice, husband-wife owned, and they were extremely frustrated by what was going on within their infrastructure. They were extremely slow. Their employees felt very tied up. Nothing was working well. So when my IT director and myself kind of dug deep into what was going on with this practice, and what we found during our digging is that this client spent $28,000 on IT services in 2024. Now, that is absolutely absurd and should never happen. What was happening is they were working with an IT provider that was probably great for a lot of businesses, but not great for the private practice. And so the way that they were set up internally was not correct for what they needed to be getting done on a daily basis. So we went in and we worked with getting them set up correctly so that there were no more lag times, updates, all the frustrations on their day-to-day workflow. And right now, that mess that we cleaned up, they are operating efficiently, and everybody seems to be happy. And that was just 6 weeks ago. So having an IT company that understands compliance, understands private practice, and what goes on within the infrastructure is hugely important. Okay, back to you, Michael.
Yeah, that was a great example, Trish. Thank you. So here's something we see all the time, especially in fast-growing practices. You've got tablets, laptops, desktops, maybe a shared computer at the front desk, and they're all being used by different staff throughout the day. Sometimes they're shared, sometimes they go home with someone, and oftentimes there's no consistent system in place to keep track of what's being used or how it's being protected. With so many moving pieces, it's easy to start missing small things. So maybe one device doesn't have antivirus. Maybe another hasn't had a system update in months. Or maybe someone just checks personal email or plugs in a USB drive without thinking twice about it. There's a lot of instances where vulnerabilities can sneak in. It's not always some targeted cyber attack like we see on the movies. A lot of breaches happen because somebody clicked the wrong link, opened an infected file, or used an unsecured device on a public Wi-Fi network.
So this is where I'll interject again. We're constantly seeing offices without compliant business class firewalls or routers. Most often, they're using what's provided to them by their ISP provider, which is their internet service provider, or they're using a compliant device that they have not had proper security set up. Maybe they don't have the proper security options, or they haven't had them updated or patched. And this seems to be a very frequent occurrence as we are talking to clients that have never worked with us before. And this is where we have a security analysis that we do at the beginning with our clients. And this is where we're able to see vulnerabilities in each practice and identify the gaps that those clients are having and how we can help make them more secure.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is without a consistent plan to manage these devices, what's on them, who's using them, how they're connected to your systems, you're always a few small steps away from a much bigger problem. And where most practices feel that impacts first is really in their EHR. At this point, Most dermatology practices are using a cloud-based EHR, and platforms like Ezderm are built to be fast, secure, and flexible. But here's what we run into constantly. The software works just fine. It does its job, but the network behind it just can't keep up. So if your internet isn't stable, or if your Wi-Fi signal drops between rooms, or maybe you've got a firewall from 5 years ago still trying to run the show, that is going to create lag, it's going to create freezing, and it's going to provide login issues. And from the user's perspective, it feels like the EHR is at fault or broken. We've seen providers trying to chart mid-patient while the screen buffers. We've seen front desk staff refreshing the same page over and over just to check someone in, or image uploads timing out mid-process. It's quite frustrating, but more than that, it's honestly avoidable. Another huge issue we see is redundancy, or the lack thereof it. If your primary internet goes down, and if you don't have a failover connection in place, everything stops. It's your worst nightmare. You're locked out of your EHR, which means no charts, no orders, no documentation. The whole system is down. Now, the takeaway here isn't just upgrade your internet or get faster internet. It's about building your network intentionally that supports your day-to-day operation. You want one that's stable, secure, and designed around how your practice really functions. Because if the foundation is weak, it doesn't just slow you down, it puts you at full risk. And that brings us to the next piece of this puzzle, security. When most people think about data breaches, they picture something dramatic. Something like a hacker breaking in from the outside, a full-scale ransomware attack, or maybe some advanced malware that just takes down the entire system. But what we see often in practices, especially the smaller specialty ones, is a much more subtle attack. It might be a staff member using a shared workstation to check their Gmail and click a phishing email. Someone downloads a file from a vendor that looks legitimate, but it isn't. Maybe a laptop gets taken home for the weekend, it's used on an unsecured Wi-Fi network, and it's brought back into the office network, carrying that vulnerability with it. Or it could be something as simple as someone plugging in a USB drive, just trying to transfer a few images, and unknowingly install something malicious. None of these actions seem dangerous in the moment, but all it takes is one slip, and suddenly you've got unauthorized access, exposed PHI, and a potential HIPAA violation. These things will bring serious interruptions to your ability to operate efficiently. And most often, practices don't even realize this is happening until it's too late. Okay, so in 2024 alone, we saw over 130 million patient records were compromised, and small practices, ones without formal device policies, regular staff training, or endpoint monitoring, were some of the most frequent targets. Now, stop there. We're not trying to sound the alarm, and we understand nobody can be perfect 100% of the time, but what we can do is be proactive. So having the right protections in place, things like automatic backups, email filtering, device tracking, encryption, those are all safety nets that catch these issues before they become full-on crises. The reason is because once you're dealing with a breach, it's now no longer just an IT fix. Now you're dealing with reporting obligations, potential fines, lost patient trust, and a major hit to your workflow. So when we say it doesn't take much, it truly is not a scare tactic. That's just a warning based on what we've seen far too many times.
Well, this is where I'll jump in because I could talk about this for hours. Being the co-founder of Spin Compliance, I have seen this multiple times. And like Michael said, not to scare anybody, we're here to assist. And so I'll stick to a story or two on this because there's quite a few that I could go on, and we just don't have that kind of time. So we have dealt with clients on our compliance program that have experienced a ransomware attack, and we've had to take over and walk them through the reporting process of lost and stolen PHI and notifying each patient as well as the government. I have one practice in in particular that this happened to in Florida. They were a 2-location private practice. They experienced a ransomware attack, and the ransomware had taken all of their patient records, letters A through M. And that had happened in the course of night, like when they had closed the office to when they came in the morning. So I got a phone call. I wasn't even to work yet, and I was receiving voicemail after voicemail from the doctor, letting us know that this was happening, and obviously in panic mode. So that was something that we were able to basically take over and help with, so that they didn't have to be shut down due to ridiculous amounts of fines. We've also had a client who experienced stolen records, because this was another Florida practice, and the front office staff was sitting at the desk, and one morning a disgruntled patient, walked in and was being very aggressive. The front office personnel got up from their computer and walked back to go get the doctor. And in that time, their computer was not logged off correctly and securely. And that patient obviously had done some research and realized that they could get behind the screen of that office, took pictures of 7 patient demographics that were up on the screen, and was able to report them for HIPAA violations and not being a compliant practice. So, like I said, having everything locked down correctly is important. And what we do here on our compliance side is education. Education is key. We train our compliance customers on best practices, on how to avoid breaches on the daily. And we believe education for all staff is key to keep your practice safe and secure. We're all about the proactive approach here at North Shore Computer, like Michael mentioned earlier. All right, passing it back to you, Michael.
Great. So now that we've looked at where the real risks tend to show up, let's shift into what actually works, right? So these are going to be practical, proven steps that any practice can take to stay ahead of the curve and protect what matters most. What we'll see here on this slide are 5 foundational IT security practices, and we're going to walk through each one. So first, we have encrypt every device. This is your first layer of defense, whether it's a front desk desktop, a provider's laptop, or even just a phone. If it stores or accesses patient information, it needs to be encrypted. That way, if the device is ever lost, stolen, the data on it is unreadable. No encryption, full exposure. When it's encrypted, you're protected, and it often prevents a breach from becoming a reportable event. Second, use multi-factor authentication. This is one of the simplest and most effective tools out there right now. It requires a second step beyond just a password. Usually you'll have a text or a prompt or some type of a code from an app. Every system that touches patient data, your EHR, your email, your cloud storage, should have it turned on. Passwords alone just aren't enough anymore. Third, ongoing training. We know your team doesn't have to be IT pros, but they should know how to spot red flags. A quick phishing simulation, a refresher on secure browsing, or just a reminder not to plug in USB drives from home. These small touches do go a long way, and doing them regularly, not just once a year, will continue to build those strong habits. Automate software and security updates. If there is one easy win in IT security, it is this. Unpatched systems are a huge vulnerability, and it usually happens because somebody clicks the remind me later notification too many times. Automating those patches ensures your tool stays secure without needing manual oversight every week, and keeps you focused on what you need to be focused on. And lastly, backups. Not just any backups, but again, one that's encrypted, stored off-site, and actually tested. Local backups can be taken out by ransomware just like the rest of your network. Cloud-based backups, when configured correctly, give you that secure, reliable safety net if something does go wrong. Now, looking at these 5 best practices, None of these steps are expensive or complex, but when they're put together, they do create a strong layered defense that will protect your practice without creating more work for your team. If you do not have in-house IT, or even if you do, we cannot stress enough that choosing the right outside partner makes a world of a difference. Not all IT providers are built the same, kind of like Trish was explaining earlier, and most really don't understand what practices like yours actually need. So we're going to go through 4 recommendations that we would say you need to look out for when trying to decide who's the right IT partner for your practice. First, healthcare specific experience. This is critical. Healthcare has its own pace, its own tools, and it definitely has its own regulatory landscape. Your IT partner should know what an EHR is. They should know how a front desk actually operates and what the day looks like inside a dermatology practice. If they're figuring this out on the job, they're more than likely probably not the right fit for you. Second, a compliance first mindset. This goes well beyond just fixing tech. This is about protecting your patient data. Your IT support should understand HIPAA, should understand PCI, and the unique security needs that come with handling electronic health records. Unfortunately, this isn't optional anymore, especially as audits and ransomware threats continue to rise. You really need a partner who's built compliance into the foundation of what they do. Third tip would be fast human support, right? So there's nothing more frustrating than waiting on hold or getting bounced between outsourced support teams when something's gone wrong. You need a team that's responsive, available, and actually understands your environment so that when you call, you're getting real help from someone who already understands the setup. And lastly, proactive monitoring and backups. We always say that great IT isn't just about fixing the issues, it's about preventing them, more importantly. The right partner will be monitoring your systems, patching your vulnerabilities, and testing your backups regularly. Not just assuming that everything is going to be okay and everything's fine because no alarms have gone off yet or no calls have come in from the practice. Because oftentimes when these problems are caught early enough, they stay small. So having said all of that, the bottom line is you don't just need an IT vendor. You need a partner that understands your world, protects your data, and helps your practice run better day to day.
All right. So the next slide is basically how can we help? So North Shore Computer, I think you've probably gathered from this call already that we specialize in healthcare specific services, and we truly can do it all. We understand the foundational setup to keep practices running smoothly. And some of the offerings that we have in house for our clients start with HIPAA audit tools and education. So if you were to join us, these are some of the things that we would right off the bat work with you on. We have network infrastructure planning. Something that I personally love is we are like a concierge service type model for individual practices. We listen to what it is that you are looking for, what you think you need, and then we work together as a team to try and build exactly that. We have endpoint management and licensing tracking, patient data protection with real-time alerts, and Ezderm infrastructure support. We prioritize people. You'll always have someone to call who understands your setup, and there are no black holes or no bouncing around, like Michael mentioned earlier. So in conclusion for today, we have created with Ezderm an exclusive offer for all Ezderm users or potential Ezderm users. We are extending these offers to you. So the first thing we have is a security assessment and remote evaluation. This is key. What happens here is that we will do a security evaluation with you, run through a bunch of questions to see where your vulnerabilities are, where your gaps are, and make recommendations on those. And then we will also have our IT support staff call into your office and do a remote evaluation of all your equipment, just so that we can get an overview of what you have going on and how we can best support you if needed. We have agreed upon a discounted managed services solution. So if you wanted to join the North Shore team, we would be able to give you those offers at a discounted rate for being an Ezderm client, and we will offer 10% on those IT support packages for the first year. We truly believe that you cannot fix what you don't know is broken. We know that our clients did not go to school for IT support. We know that they are focused on bringing in patients and revenue to their practices. So we want to be the behind the scenes team that is guiding you to having smooth operations of your infrastructure. We want to try and be proactive, like Michael mentioned, so that we are not running into big problems. We don't like big problems just as much as you don't like big problems. We want to try and keep everything running smoothly. If you are interested in any of these offers, or you have questions about what you've heard today, or you're just a little bit interested, we would love to talk to you. We would love to hear what's going on and how we could help mitigate some of those issues, or just to talk and see maybe are we going to be the right fit for you somewhere down the road. So we have a QR code that you can take a picture of, and or take a screenshot of Michael's information. We would love to hear from you. We would love to help you. And our goal is to team up with Ezderm and help all of you stay as compliant and successful as possible. So we thank you so much for being here and listening to us today. And we are now going to open it up to questions, comments, whatever. We would love to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Trish and Michael. I think these are all just great things to ponder, and great tips on how to kind of secure your practice from an IT perspective. We do have a bunch of questions in the chat here, and I want to just go ahead and get started with those. First one I see here: what are the first steps that a smaller practice should take to build a more secure IT environment?
So that's a great question. First steps, I would be to find the right IT company. I believe you want to, let's just say you were to call us. The first thing we would do is we would do that evaluation that we were talking about. We'd want to see, what does your internal infrastructure look like, so that we can set you up correctly. It's all about the setup, right? So let's go ahead and do a remote evaluation, see what kind of technology you're using, making sure that you are set up correctly. I think, like I had mentioned, that one client that spent the $28,000 last year in 2024, they weren't set up correctly. And so therefore, there were just so many holes and gaps that they were experiencing that just slowed down their day-to-day workflow. And it shouldn't be like that. So, that one client said to me, she said, Trish, we spend our IT company does updates, and then the next day we're spending 2 hours just spinning. And that's 2 hours of revenue that's being lost, and frustration. So definitely you want to work with an IT provider to make sure that you are set up correctly, what needs to be put in place. And we will guide you on that totally. And I think that's also like a phone call too, because it all depends on the individual practice and how you're set up, so that we can guide you. Not one practice is set up exactly the same.
Gotcha. Thanks for that, Trish. And I do want to kind of echo that, just from what we've seen too, just from an Ezderm side, no two practices are the same. So like a one size fits all mentality isn't really going to work, from like an IT security standpoint. Is that kind of what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And it depends too. You could have one practice that has multiple locations, or one practice that's set up a different way. They have different computers, tablets, laptops. It just all depends on the setup of that individual practice. So it is really a case by case situation.
Gotcha. I've got kind of two questions from the same attendee here, so I'll kind of ask them as they're kind of related. Um, how often should staff receive like cybersecurity training, and then how can practices like foster a culture of security awareness without maybe overwhelming their staff from like a day to day type basis?
Absolutely great question. So I would say that your staff needs to be trained at a minimum one time a year. It can't help to do twice a year. Typically, we start our clients out twice a year just so that we are getting that education out in little bits and pieces. But we also are very aware that time is money and not all practices want to take the time to educate. So we try to keep them as brief as possible. But I would definitely recommend, if you haven't started it, start with twice a year and then you can go down to once a year. We also train our practice's new employees as they come on board, because that's really important. Something that I do see from time to time is, unfortunately, it is the employees that are most often causing the breaches. So you want to make sure that they are educated. Something as simple as their iPhone being connected to your corporate network can cause a lot of problems. So there are just these little things that happen that can cause bigger issues. So training is key. So that was the first question. And then what was the second question again?
Um,
How
what are maybe some best practices to foster that cybersecurity awareness, but also not overwhelm the staff with cybersecurity type things while they're doing their day to day? I think was kind of the gist of it.
Right. So you don't want to overwhelm them. There needs to be a little bit of fear, because they have to understand something wrong could really hurt your business completely. So that, again, it comes down to that education, just making them attend some of these quick trainings so that they are aware. I always have them sign off that they have been trained. And then just having either your office manager or yourself just keeping a close eye on, hey, is that something we should be doing or not be doing? And just being aware, because there is a lot that comes along with not being cybersecurity compliant, and you don't want that to hurt your business.
Absolutely. Next question here, and I think this is kind of relevant. And we talked a little bit about passwords or having like a shared computer at the front desk that maybe the front desk staff you know all uses. What's the recommended way of managing staff passwords in a clinical setting? Is it like a office password manager? Is it maybe a biometric login, like a fingerprint scanner, something like that?
So multi-factor authentication is something that's coming about. That's pretty big. Most EMRs are going to make your employees change their passwords within the EMR system every 60 to 90 days. So every single employee should have their own, I always say, like a banking type password, not just 1234 or their first name and their last name initial. So having something complex, numbers, symbols, um, is really important. And then another thing is, we can set up everybody, our technicians can set up everybody in a compliant manner as far as their logins for the computer, but we always talk about workflow, right? So you don't want to have your front desk person who needs to run back to the back and they can't get into that computer and they're waiting for the doctor to unlock it. That's not going to work. So we will recommend that they can have the same password to unlock screens, but when they're logging in, they need to be logged in as themselves, because that's a way for us to be able to manage who, if there was a breach, where did that breach come from?
Right.
And that's, again, like if you're working with an IT company that doesn't set you up properly, that can be a big issue.
Gotcha. That makes sense. One more question here. How can practices ensure both their EHR and their practice management systems are protected? I think we've touched on that a little bit through a lot of these best practices, but if there's maybe just a kind of a short, maybe concise answer on how to protect kind of everything in that field.
How their EHR and what was the other one?
And the practice management system are protected?
Again, it's going to come down to so when you're working with these EHR softwares, they are compliant. They're not going to set you up with a non-compliant software. Where there's a misconception is that people feel that, oh, I'm working with this compliant software, so my office is compliant. And that's a big misconception. That's not true. The softwares are compliant, and that's fabulous. But again, it comes back to that infrastructure setup. If your infrastructure is not set up in a compliant manner, then that's where you're going to have those holes and gaps and vulnerabilities.
Gotcha.
So, and that's where that security assessment that we've agreed upon with Ezderm, that's really helpful for us to be able to see, how are you set up? Our technicians will go in and they'll look at all the computers, the equipment, your internet, everything, just to see, hey, you need some work there, or looking really good. Or the person that you're working with is doing a great job. Like, keep it up.
I do want to thank both Michael and Trish for taking the time to present this information to us. Again, thank you to everyone who attended today. You will receive a copy of the webinar presentation as well as the video in your email, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much. Have a good day.